All right, joining us now, Joe Rexrode, who covers the Titans for The Athletic. Joe, very excited to get your thoughts on this. Big day, big piece of news for the Tennessee Titans today. They signed DeAndre Hopkins to a 2-year, $26 million deal worth up to $32 million in incentives. What are your initial thoughts on DeAndre Hopkins heading to Tennessee?
Well, I think I think the Titans were probably in the lead for a long time here, and I'd love to know some of the other offers, but I'm gonna guess that nothing came close to this. And look, they had to proceed this way. I mean, I think you can look back. I even go back to like draft, the last draft presser, with Mike Vrabel. Vrabel in particular, Rand Carr thought I Mike Vrabel, but they had gone through the draft and free agency. They basically picked up Chris Moore and they got Colton Dowell in the 7th round, but it was somewhat stunning for a team with a receiver room like theirs to do as little as they did. And Vrabel, some people took it as a promise. I didn't take it quite that strong, but he kind of said, we got to, we're going to figure this out. You look back at what he said that day and you kind of have the sense that this was the plan all along. And it makes sense. Obviously Vrabel spent 4 years with him there. And although Titans fans have a long list of formerly great players who then came here and watched their careers fade immediately, they had to do this.
I was surprised, and the background that he has with DeAndre Hopkins, you're talking about them in Houston together. When Mike Vrabel was in Houston, obviously DeAndre Hopkins was there. The only piece of it that's really surprising for me is that they would be willing to go down this road with not only an aging receiver, but an aging receiver who pretty famously does not love to practice after the way that the Julio Jones experience went in Tennessee. That was the only thing I was like, oh man, I can't believe they're running this back after how awful that seemed to go for that entire season.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But, the difference, of course, I mean, when that happened, like Vrabel's, I think, trepidation was pretty obvious. Like he was like that first day, he's like, yeah, I called Saban and talked to him for a long time. And he's like, I don't know. Like you could tell he wasn't sure. And you have all these years together in Houston. So I'm assuming there's a good relationship and a little bit better understanding of how someone ticks. Vrabel is, for his hard nose and kind of old school, he is kind of a new age coach. He gives these
guys
a
former player. It hasn't been that long since he played.
Exactly. And ultimately it comes down to production for him. He gives, Ben Jones, and I know it's like injury related, but like that's maybe Vrabel's favorite player ever here in Tennessee. And I swear he practiced like 3 times the last 2 seasons, Again, it's like, just get it to Sunday, Ben. Get out there and give me what you got Sunday. But, Hopkins, knows this offense. He also knows Tim Kelly. So I don't think that's, going to be a big concern. Even the Julio year, if he's able to actually stay healthy and not constantly retweak the hamstring, it's okay. It's an all right year, but he's not. So it's eerily similar, when you look at the production of those two guys and their age the year before they came here. But obviously the Titans need a different outcome.
The most interesting element of this to me, and I tweeted about this a little bit earlier today, is essentially what it says about the Titans' timeline and their plan. They're trying to straddle 2 different realities, it feels like. You're taking a step back. You have to take a step back. You've pushed all your chips into the middle with the way that you've restructured the Derrick Henry contract, the Ryan Tannehill contract. That version of this team is coming to an end. Both of those guys are going to be free agents next year. You're moving on. But you have this defense where you've committed real resources to kind of your core of young defensive players. You give out the Jeffrey Simmons extension this year. You've already paid Amani Hooker. You've already paid Kevin Byard. You've already paid Harold Landry. So you have this defense that's probably too good for you to tank. And then you have Ryan Tannehill still on the roster. If you were going to go the other route where you're going to really strip this thing down to the studs, you probably needed to do that back in February, March. You needed to move on from Tannehill. You needed to kind of move on from maybe a couple of these older guys, maybe release Kevin Byard, whatever you end up doing. They don't do that. They kind of keep all that intact. So now you're almost so far toward the direction of we want to stay competitive now that you feel compelled to continue down that road. And the Hopkins signing feels like the next step in that. But then you have Will Levis waiting in the wings. So again, they're trying to straddle these kind of 2 different timelines where you are turning the page. There's no denying that. You picked a quarterback in the top 40, but you also are trying to stay competitive in the moment. And I just think that's really difficult to balance.
I agree. And, it's like obviously I think some inquiries were made on Tannehill and Henry, right? I think they looked at a lot of different things. We know that they tried to get Byard to take a pay cut, but you're absolutely right, Robert. It's like, I mean, I still feel like this is the last hurrah year. It's like, say goodbye to Derek and say goodbye to Ryan, but especially Derek. I mean, he's such a special, beloved player in this town. And I don't see how he's, not somewhere else next year. But I tell you what if this works out? Hopkins is healthy all year. The defense is salty. Landry comes back healthy. Best case scenario, the offensive line is okay. I can't get much better than okay at this point.
I think even that's an optimistic viewpoint. That's a little bit rosy, in my opinion, personally.
I'm with you. I mean, that is the biggest question now. But if a lot of things break their way, what if they win the division, win a playoff game, and Tannehill plays great? I still think Tannehill around the league is a little bit undervalued. And even last year, the circumstances were horrific. What if he's really good, wins a playoff game, and now you're sitting there, like you said, you've now you took Levis, high in the second, but you also took Willis before that in the third round. You've done so much to look toward turning the page, but what if it's how could you not try again? It's really fascinating. It would have to be incredibly compelling evidence, but I think that if you're the Titans, you have to keep an open mind on that, right? And also, what does Levis prove to be this year?
Here's my thought about this, is that by signing DeAndre Hopkins, you just stay a little bit more competitive in 2023, but you're not really going to do anything. This probably doesn't make you better than Jacksonville, and it definitely doesn't make you better than the real contenders in the AFC. This kind of feels like a message that we're just going to try to win consistently every single year. So by going out and getting a guy like this, you have no other avenues to get a receiver like this offseason, and probably next offseason, which I think is why it's a little bit justifiable. So we're going to stay competitive. We're never going to tear this thing down. We're going to consistently try to win as many games as we can. And in 2023, that probably means even if things go well, even if that timeline that you're discussing ends up unfolding, maybe this team wins 8 or 9 games, because I still think the offensive line is bad enough that's probably not that's probably where the ceiling is. There are position groups on this team that are questionable enough where I don't think they're going to be super, super competitive. But by staying competitive, by kind of just this is the culture we have here, this is who we are. When you turn the page into next year, you have 1 year of Will Levis in the building. DeAndre Hopkins is still here. So you're almost just ready to hit the ground running next year when you're turning the page to a cheaper quarterback. Even if you're paying DeAndre Hopkins $15 million, you've got $90 million in cap space. So this almost just feels like an intermediary season onto the plan that they're actually trying to see through and they're actually trying to execute, while just staying competitive and making sure we're one of these places, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, all of those sorts of teams, that we're just going to compete every single year, and we're just going to try to jump from between era to era. And I think what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, is the best case scenario for this, where you never have to bottom out to find your quarterback of the future. You can kind of just nimbly jump from one stage to the next, and you just are consistently competitive the entire time. And that's the culture that you're building in your building. That's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And obviously Vrabel, look, I don't think you can find too many people in the NFL who are going to be pro tanking in any way, right? But Mike Vrabel, it eats at his soul every single loss, right? And I do think he wants to set a certain baseline. That said, I could make a strong case to win 3 games this year and get Marvin Harrison Jr. next year and really take a step. But hey, that's not going to happen.